Oh, Canada, Mampi and Jibayaj, Mindakina, Kitche Apitendawa, Mindena, Mashko Wendamda, we went Zatuda, Nani Weda, oh, Canada, where we're gonna win them love. Oh, Canada, get your buenas. Nani queda, mi guecho wendanda. Nani queda, mi guecho wendanda.
To allow for a savings of time, a savings of money, or an opportunity to share a resource or a resource person with more communities and more frequently. If you're driving out to Sarnia every other day or every other week, and that costs you a half day of travel there and a half day of travel back, and instead if those 2 half days can be put into an online connection with another different school somewhere else, well, now for the same amount of time that we've used a resource person for a school, we can use that same resource person for 3 different schools. So there's value in that. The trade-off is that you cannot replicate the experience of being in a room with technology, and I will maintain that indefinitely. But it opens too many doors to be ignored completely, and I think that's where I find the most fascinating aspects of this technology and this this new century collaboration. There's so much potential to connect people who would otherwise not connect, and to in some ways create a stronger relationship between those people than you could if you were relying solely on traditional get in a car or get on a plane and travel to meet somebody. We can put a resource in Vancouver in contact with somebody who's looking for assistance in Ontario, and the cost to put those 2 people into contact in the traditional sense would prohibit it and probably prevent it from ever occurring. With this technology, they can be talking daily if they choose, and that you can end up having relationships and a diversity of resources that extends so much further than anything we've had before, and the effects that can have long term are where things can get really fascinating for me.
Guy I go for lunch, my co-worker, he said, well, we had to go down to Sherwood Mills and look at a way to Skype or record or talk with another school to school using Skype and getting them up and running. And I said, well, why, Trevor, why don't we just use Polycom? That's kind of what it's for. It's kind of like conferencing between 2 people. Well, Skype's good enough, he said. I go, no, it's not good enough. They need to have a wide open area where you can see a whole bunch of people talking, and then it has to focus down into something written on a piece of paper, a lesson taught by a person. You're going to need better cameras. You got to use this Polycom conferencing unit. And he goes, well, come on down. So I followed him down one day, and I said, no, this is going to work. And I told you guys, well, maybe we'll give this a shot, and I'll give you an example of how to do it, right? And then Wapu Island said that they actually had a unit. At first we were just going to use your laptop, but a laptop doesn't it just shows one face, where they had a unit, they got it up and running, just miraculously that they had one, and we had one, we got it working, we made a call, and it seemed to work really fine with the technology of Polycom. From there we just kind of experimented and went through everything. The Polycom unit also gave where she could record a lesson on another media and actually introduce it into the lesson as well, so they can learn that way, not just from the cameras. This Polycom unit picked it up perfect, as well as the Zoom aspect onto the lessons, changing it from the table lesson to a blackboard lesson, and then focusing back on Leslie which is in this different room, teaching the other teachers.
The situation that you presented to us was interesting because as the communities were continuing to grow in their network standards, there were certainly two different levels of network connectivity at both sites, and that one initially was feared we might have to try to connect via just dedicated cell signal, that there wasn't that direct connection yet, but that we could get a cell receiver to do one of those little local hotspot type internet connections just over the cell tower Wi-Fi. And the concerns of how do you push reliable video conferencing through a system like that and have faith in it when the dust settles. So it was certainly a relief to get on site and discover that their network was better than we feared it might be. We were hoping for the best and preparing for the worst, and so we're very relieved when it turned out to be the former, not the latter. The technology decisions, it's always about trying to find the best available resources that you have at the time. And so in the early days of the other initiative you mentioned, that was a Polycom-based system. That was a great standard. That's where our roots in video conferencing are with standard definition Polycom video conferencing systems. I still have a couple rolling around the building. But the university had gotten into a newer system that allowed a higher level of connectivity to individual users on laptops, and was easier to connect via a desktop client or a laptop client. And so we used that in this instance instead. We were intentional about trying to future-proof the project by making sure that the carts and the systems that were loaded onto those carts could be used in the future, connecting into other systems in the event that we tried to go a different direction. As the network quality improves, you're poised to be able to introduce a high-def video using both those carts. So that would be an important way to make sure that you're ready long-term. At the moment, I believe they're still pushing out a standard definition signal, but that can be raised up. At the moment, it's just a reality of the network you're on, that you don't want to try to push too high a quality through that. It becomes akin to pushing fire hose water through a garden hose. It's just not going to work, and everyone's going to get wet. So the long term is that you'll be able to, at some point, to flip a few switches and take that up to a high-def model, and that if you choose to move outside of the system that we're using to communicate right now, those carts are still viable resources and can be used in other systems. People often underestimate the impact of adding technology to the classroom, that it's seen as we can just throw a camera in the corner and then we can share what we're doing here with people who aren't here and it'll be great. And they don't take into consideration the technology, who's going to run it, what do people at remote sites have to have, how it can be affected by things like quality of network, that sort of thing. And so the system we're using currently, each of the individual systems are capable of dialing each other if they know each other's IP address. So it's both of those carts that we created are standard video conferencing systems in a traditional sense, and that the hardware is capable of dialing other systems as long as they each know each other's numbers. The way that we connected them here through the university is that they're part of a directory, so that they can call each other simply by looking up the names of the systems. So when each of those carts turns on in its school, wherever it is, it sends up a little flare to our server here at the university and says, I'm over here, and the operator system here makes a little note of where that where that system is now. And so when you log in or the other school logs in, they can go to their directory and just say, I want to talk to this school, and the operator system here will connect directly to that system. The other aspect is that it allows for multi-point meetings, so that all three systems can meet together in a virtual room hosted here at our site. Looking to the future, there's an opportunity to move into a model that's independent of of the university's resources. If the band decided that they wanted to host this themselves, they could do this. They could invest in the systems. They could run it themselves. The thing that we often underestimate is the investment of time and resources required for running systems like this. It's one thing to buy a telephone, bring it home, and hang it on your wall. It's another thing to know that there's a lot of wires between me and everyone I call, and there's an entire phone company out there working constantly to maintain it, keep it current, make sure that everybody else's phone works when I call, and you just take it for granted because you pick up the phone and you push buttons. It's the same with video conferencing. You're connecting to other sites, and if you're going to host and run your own system, then there has to be people in place to do that. And there's not often the resources to hire the staff to maintain the services, and that's where there can be an advantage in finding other organizations who will do that for you. So long term, it could be something that you want to pursue yourselves. It could be something that you want to continue to hire out to another group for. A lot of the newer systems and a lot of the new world of video conferencing is based on a web-based model, which is a lot easier for folks to get behind because it feels similar to consumer products like Skype, where you're logging in with an account and an ID, and you're doing it from your own computer, your own laptop. Most of them now have built-in webcams. High-def webcams can be purchased extra for very cheap. It's the same with high-quality headphones if you want to get a good mic and audio system set up. There's great hands-free mics that you can buy, all of which are designed to plug into laptops or desktop computers and open the door to a web-based conferencing model. That still has to be hosted somewhere. So the client experience is certainly much easier and much more comfortable and familiar for the end user because it can look like a consumer product, as I mentioned, like a Skype, but it can also, because you're doing it on your own computer, you're better understanding what's going on than standing in front of a machine holding a remote control you've never seen before, trying to figure out where to point it and how to work it. And that's certainly clearly the path that things are going in right now. So there are new video conferencing systems that capitalize on that web-based client model. They still have room units available for large gatherings, but certainly focus on the client experience of being able to easily download and install software that allows you to connect instantly and do calls. Individual endpoint experiences are certainly getting a lot easier, and that in a rural school type environment where there isn't usually a high degree of staffing and support staff roles available. If you're looking at a scenario where it's a teacher who wants to figure out how to connect to another class or some other online resource and they've got a laptop and a webcam and a mic, it's still possible to do so, which would be a great tool for a rural school to be able to use. They wouldn't necessarily have to be running the server side or the host side of things. They would just be an endpoint client. Somewhere centrally, at the heart of this internetwork of schools that you're creating, you'd need some central server that's running that system, and that's the point. That's either you're hiring someone to provide that, or you've made a consensus and come together to decide where and how you will host this as something that you're doing yourself for this network of schools. Either option's viable. Either one has their advantages. That could be a fee-for-service kind of setup. It could be something that you choose to invest in yourselves and run if you decide it's something that you want to invest in. There's always that where you have to make that decision of how you want to spend your money. Do you want to spend you want to spend it on somebody else to provide the service, in which case they're going to make a little money on that because they're providing the service for you, but they're going to take care of everything so that you just pick up the phone and it works, or in this case turn on the camera and it works? Or do you want to employ someone whose sole job it is to maintain the system and run it?
Well, I guess when we started the journey, we were trying to figure out how could we reach a population using technology. But we also in Reading Recovery have standards and guidelines that must be followed in order that you can carry the trademark. So using technology, of course, was a new piece which had to be okayed by the Canadian Institute of Reading Recovery. But we really sat down and tried to think about the components of the training program that are essential to it, and how we might use the technology and still remain true to the essence. So one of the things, of course, that the technology, as we were using the Polycom device to reach our population with our one teacher, one of the things that's probably different in the way that we use the technology than in other ways that a Polycom unit is used is that we were really trying to target that collaborative nature, peer collaboration, and through facilitated discussion. In Reading Recovery, we sit around in a circle because that's an essential part, that you are talking with your peers and collaborating. It's kind of a flattened hierarchy, that it's involves everyone. Everyone is expected to speak. Everyone is expected to make their thinking transparent in order that you can build off of what somebody has said and go a little bit deeper. So the first impression with working with the project is, quite frankly, that relationship building would have been diluted through the use of polycomming in our friends from the First Nation schools. So one of the avenues that we took was in really acknowledging that piece that you have to have. If you want to build trusting relationships, you really have to have some face-on-face time. So Nabish and Roberta were integrated into the group. They came. So the training in Reading Recovery works that it's 2 times a month. Teachers come for a half-day session. So for one visit in that month, those teachers would come to the training site. And in doing that, we were able to get them to work with the group that they were with, build relationships. Rather than having a person at the front deliver content, how do you reasonably get people to interact with the content through discussion, which is very different. So that set about a few contingencies for us as well. So along the way, we found things that worked and things that didn't work. The teachers, of course, were the teachers at first, and the rest of the teachers in the group were a little bit uneasy with the technology. But as we progressed, that kind of sorted itself out. And what I found as a facilitator is that I had to download. When it started to work better, when I was able to download some of the technical aspects. So for instance, I don't know, it was, Alicia, please make sure that you've got the remote in your hand and you'll be in charge of getting the camera to move. We would sit at a table, we would set up camera shots in order that, and the camera shots would be numbered in order that Roberta or Nabish, perceiving from their remote site, can see the speaker and talk directly to them. We also, when we were doing small group work as well, I also had to plan forward. So if I wanted people to have an elbow conversation, I'd have to plan forward in terms of how that's going to work over in a corner with a TV set up with another teacher, another couple of teachers with them conversing with each other. So we also had live lessons. So Roberta was always watching, or Roberta or Nabish in the beginning, were always watching the lessons through a two-way mirror. How to get them to comment on what they were observing was another challenge. With a conversation that it goes back and forth, you're paying attention to body language. And so your step-in point is easy when you're face-to-face. It's a little bit harder when there's a remote person. So, but when we're behind the glass, it's dark. And so you're paying attention to not just body language, but you're paying attention to gaps or silences in order to know when you're stepping mark. So that was a little bit more challenging. And so then I think that also continues to be one of the challenges, is how to get that conversational tone going behind the glass when the room is dark. You've been removed from all your other indicators that let you know when to step into a conversation and when to ask a question. So that was the impression of the beginning of the journey. It was a training year, and so as a training year, that in and of itself causes a little bit of discombobulation in teachers because they have to make their practice transparent. They bring a student to the site, which they've got a parent or an administrator, everybody's eyes on them. Then to add this extra dimension to it, kind of it created an uncomfortable atmosphere. And people want to have that warm, fuzzy kind of human interaction. And it was originally, I would agree with you, originally, back stiffened, but we kind of did get used to it. It takes a little bit of floor planning. So for instance, I always have a floor plan operating. So markers on the floor, like when you grab the TV, move it over this way. Because you have to keep the flow going properly. No matter what though, it's hard work. Absolutely, like the teachers became much more comfortable, but it was definitely, I had to change my mindset, and I had to think about another human being in a different way. And sometimes there were times that I just forgot that, oh yeah, Roberta's there, wait, Roberta's there. But you do have to think about things differently in using the setup. But the potential for reaching populations is amazing. So one other aspect that we also have brought into it was, which I thought worked fairly well. So I go out and I visit teachers at their site, but the distance, of course, prevented me from going to Roberta's site. So we would Polycom in. I would watch. First of all, we would start by having a little bit of a pre-discussion in order that the content of the visit is directed. I'd ask the teacher, what do you want me to observe for and give you feedback on? Roberta would let me know, and then I would watch her lesson. And I would just press mute on my end and watch her lesson. Student would go off, not any more aware that somebody has just come in and watched. And then we would chat about change. And I would give her the feedback on her lesson and how we linked that to literacy development. And I thought that was a very positive outcome of the project, and I thought that worked very well, in fact. So the United States Department of Education is as with any group, you're looking to how can you reach remote populations, and so there's some grant money that's available for projects, to pilot projects, and so they've been interested in what has been happening with the First Nations project here, and how do you reach remote populations. And I think some of the technology aspects that we've been talking about, it's what the future is. I think that the challenge, however, is truly getting to that collaboration piece. As I'm speaking, I'm thinking about the SAMR model. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so we have our IT resource teacher come, and he talks about the SAMR model. And it's how do you use technology. And essentially the point was there's a scale, and the SAMR model is a scale, that when you bump it up, that you may start using it just as a representation. So for instance, a document camera is basically overhead projector. You're using it in the same capacity. But when you add dimensions to it, you create depth with the tool. So when you are adding the collaboration piece that results, that you get far more depth from the tool that we're using. And that's the potential and the beauty, I think, of what we did here.
Good dog, said Dad. Ruff, ruff, said Lucky.
All right, buddy. How do you think you did? I think you did a pretty good job. I want to take you back to page 9 and show you something that I really liked you did, because you were looking with your eyes to make sure that it was looking right and sounding right. You said, sit, Lucky, said Dad. And then you said, naughty, Lucky, sit. But you noticed something didn't look right to you. What didn't look right, Adam? There's no naughty. And where was your mistake? Right? So what did you do? You went back and you? And what does it say here? No.
Lucky said
I love the way you noticed that and you went back and you fixed your own mistake.
And he kept having trouble with hit it.
Yes.
Hit it. And I'm wondering, thinking about your kiddies, if he couldn't get hit it because the pronoun was the ball, or the, you know, that it was, it didn't, the word was a fairly simple word, but it was structurally hard.
He knows it on its own.
I don't know Adam, but because it didn't make sense to him when he looked at it, like hit it, and because I'm thinking about your kids and how challenging pronouns are when they come in to take the place of a noun. So if it had said hit the ball, he probably wouldn't have had any problem.
I think tomorrow or after he does the running record, I'm gonna cover it up and put the ball and see how he manages it.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
Because as soon as I saw that, he kept having trouble with that, and I was thinking of your kiddies as well.
But from the oral language perspective, Vivian, yeah, for sure, his vocabulary seemed limited. I mean, not knowing what a treadmill is. Structurally, he sounded really well putting a sentence together. Like,
yeah, it's his word retrieval is very interesting.
Talk about the word river for a moment. Why is it, do you think he said lake for river? What was he not doing?
Well, he was just making this connection from here, I think.
Yes, he was.
Because here everybody says, do you live by the lake or do you live by the beach or do you live up the hill? So lake isn't something that river isn't something that he hears all the time, it's lake.
So thinking of the processing system and the three sources of information, he was using meaning and structure.
Yes.
But he forgot, he slipped in his attention to the visual information. Right. So when he has a situation like that, in fact, most of his errors, all of his errors, are a matter of which he's learned reading is, he's made the mistake of thinking reading is about guessing. And now he's having to recognize that you make a prediction based on meaning and structure, but you have to make sure it matches with the visual. So giving a prompt like, whoa, try that again and make sure you're looking carefully, is pretty well a prompt you're going to want to use a lot with him.
Because I'm wondering whether now he still loses his place.
Yes.
He still is skipping lines.
Yes.
And plus, his finger pointing, he's covering the word anyway.
Yes.
So it's not even helping him look at print.
Okay.
So I think he definitely has one-to-one control. He understands wordness. He understands, because he's matching his voice to sets of letters. He understands how words work. So I don't think he needs his finger, and I think if anything, it's taking away, it's causing visual mess in front of him.
Okay.
And I think it would be easier for him to concentrate on the words and the letters themselves if his finger wasn't causing his eyes to get cluttered up.
Speak. So now all of a sudden, they're addressing print. They have to start thinking in units of words coming together to make speech. So this is a really new thing for them to think about. If they don't have a sense of letters, words, then writing is going to be very difficult. When they are writing and they are thinking, they're right down at the word level, they're solving each word at a time. It really makes it easy for them to think in terms of words. Letters versus words, words versus sentences. So the more writing they do, the easier to control the reading. And the more reading they do, the easier to use that knowledge in writing.